You are listening to Abnormal Spaces.
I'm Donnie.
I'm Ryan.
In this podcast, we discuss conceptual realities, the researchers, authors, and explorers who describe and define them, as well as our personal experiences in these abnormal spaces. In this episode, we discuss healing frequencies utilizing light and/or sound, the Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillator and its proven efficacy, experiments and manipulations of physical objects using specific audio tones, and much more.
All right, we're conserving our juice here today.
Right. Okay. We've been saving up the juice for you. I was checking out this YouTube video, and it was talking about the multi-wave oscillator that Lakhovsky developed. And, you know, I knew some of what you had told me about it, and so I learned a little bit about it that way. What I didn't realize, I don't know if it was his father or stepfather, but he had quadriplegia, and he went in, he's in the hospital. He goes in there every day for 4 weeks straight, and he has a smaller device. He had made a device that he could actually carry and move in there. And so he worked up and down his spine on all these different points, and he did that for a couple of hours. And then the remaining 2 hours of the treatment was all light waves and different frequencies, so different colors of light. And in doing that in combination, within 6 weeks, he was walking out of the hospital. It was on crutches, but I mean, he wasn't able to use any of his limbs at all before this. And it blows my mind because there's an official medical record of this, but all they put was, remarkably, the patient exhibited total, I can't remember the exact phraseology. Yeah, but it was like, yeah, it happened. And that was it. It was literally like one sentence.
Of course.
And right, and they didn't know how to explain it, but they weren't going to even try.
No, they didn't want to elaborate.
Right.
They were like, oh, maybe this was just a lucky deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Maybe we just lucked out.
It was a one-time deal.
Yeah. Or they kind of delude themselves, like, well, maybe it wasn't really quadriplegia. You know, maybe it wasn't what we thought it was.
Yeah. There seems to be a lot of that. I mean, it's pretty much everything.
Yeah. Well, in behavioral psychology, they've been able to test and replicate and demonstrate that people, if they have some kind of cognitive dissonance, like they expected this outcome and they got this other outcome, they work to reduce that dissonance by essentially lying to themselves. So, well, we must have gotten that first part wrong or whatever. And so that just occurs naturally. When you add, money to it, then of course, then you're going to force that to happen.
Yeah.
And, Okay, so this is the coolest. So, talking about sound and energy and vibration, there was this Swedish researcher that went to Tibet, and he was so concerned about self-delusion and maybe being part of some mass hypnosis or something that he filmed this on several different occasions. And when it was discovered, the films were destroyed. But essentially, these, I guess, Tibetan monks, I'm not sure exactly, what their role was. But anyway, there was a cliff 250 meters high. You already know the story. And they have the bowl, and then they have the drums and the trumpets, and they levitate the rock.
Yeah.
And like, why would you destroy that? Why would you destroy that?
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and say the famous catchphrase of this entire podcast, which is Dolores Cannon.
Right.
I just literally yesterday heard that. There was a lot of information about sound frequency and harmonic information. A lot of it is like kind of not as we know it. But if the Tibetan thing happened, which I know that it did, there's too many stories.
Right.
You know, and they levitate shit with sound right now.
Right. Yes.
Like, I mean, there's little videos of them, like, you know, those little things. Have you seen those?
Yeah, and the plexiglass cube where the guy made the ball. And what was crazy is the ball not only levitated, but then they were able to spin it different directions.
Right. So it's the same principle as everything.
Yeah.
They just tapped into whatever the mass of whatever they're trying to work with is.
Right.
Which is insane. The top of my list of fascination is finding the resonant frequency of things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's over at that point.
Right,
because once you find the frequency, you can either destroy the thing or you can manipulate it.
Yeah. You can manipulate it. You can reorder it, you know, if it's broken or damaged in some way or whatever, just reorder it so now it's fixed.
And I don't want to, you know, I'm not like, well, you can destroy it. I don't mean like that. I mean like, well, a lot of people think that. But,
Right, yeah.
But I mean, you know, like in the case of like a cancer cell or something like that, or a bridge.
Right.
You know, that happened naturally.
Yes, yeah.
And that was a resonance thing.
Yeah.
Which is insane to me, that the resonance was found naturally.
Yeah. Are you talking about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the valley trapped the sound in a way, and yeah.
And that's the story anyway.
All right.
I wonder, you know, like.
Yeah. And typically, you know, the simplest answer is the correct answer 9 times out of 10. But yeah, like, you know, why destroy that bridge unless it was just to prove that you can, you know, like maybe it's a proof of concept thing.
I remember reading when Tesla invented that oscillator, the mechanical oscillator, and he tapped into the frequency of the building he was in, and it literally shook that building apart, and it was shaking other buildings apart within the vicinity of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like bricks were crumbling and stuff. And like, he destroyed it right on the spot because he was just like, holy shit. Like, okay, you know?
Yeah. Well, and like, you know, it wasn't his intention to destroy it, but like then he learned, oh, you can do this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he essentially did that with the whole earth.
Yeah.
You know, he knew what the resonant frequency of the earth was, and that was his whole thing, was to provide free energy.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really frustrating thing, that tower that he had begun construction on. And then as he was getting closer and as he was like demonstrating that it would work, all the investors pulled out.
Oh, it was JP Morgan, man.
Yeah.
Because he was in with Edison, and he was like,
yeah.
Is all money.
Yeah. Yeah. Those,
Once again. I think we're getting close to a point of no return, though. I really think like the information is so unavoidable because it's so like, on one hand, you have total misinformation mixed in with all the information.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody has a voice, so nobody has a voice.
Right.
And it's like I keep saying they, but the pullers of the strings, they know this.
Yeah.
To them, it's just like a game that they've perfected.
Right.
So they're like, oh no, we'll just leave it up to them because we'll give them this fancy little toy here.
Yeah.
Check this out. Now everybody's important.
Right.
And so nobody knows what's true.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Since everyone is special, no one is special. And yeah, all the seeking to discredit good information that might harm the pullers of the levers, you know, for a long time, governments or wealthy people or both would counter information in different ways. And now they just flood a bunch of misinformation so that people are too confused, and they can't make sense of it all.
Yeah, most people don't dig.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you're taught to second guess yourself, because you're like, oh, chakras. I don't know.
Or yeah.
That sounds, and I even do it sometimes. I'm like, that's a little woo woo. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm excitedly thinking about a bunch of different things, but.
Yeah, I am too.
Real quick, back to the Tesla shaking the building apart. There's this ancient rock formation in Saudi Arabia. It's these two big rocks, and they're like almost cubes. And there is a line. They are separated. And I don't know how many feet apart they are, but it is a perfect straight line. And then these things are actually sitting upon small rocks, they're pillars or whatever, and they don't touch. And it's so precise, it looks like a laser cut it. But there's no reason to believe that a laser cut it. It is far more likely the case that it was a use of sound and vibration and resonant energy that caused that to split the way it did.
It's wild that we come in blazing about this kind of stuff. You start talking about this because most of what I listened to in the Dolores Cannon book yesterday was this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was talking about the Atlanteans. Crystal was their main thing, but they could use their mind and focus their mind so laser-like that if you got more than one person trying to do something, to whatever, that they could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying this is a fact. None of this is a fact. I mean, a lot of it's factual, but I mean, I can't prove any of it. So,
right.
So we're just going to keep talking.
Yeah.
So the person was like, I'm in a room and, it looks like it's made out of there's a ton of crystals everywhere, and the walls are made of a stone, but it's like a malleable stone. It's almost like a clay or something that's wet-ish.
Yeah.
And so the information that came out was that they would focus in on a stone or whatever it is, and they would make it malleable to the point where it was kind of clay-like. And then they would form that into the shape that they wanted, and then it would harden back into stone.
That's crazy.
So because they knew the resonant frequency of whatever it is they were working with.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Well, Tesla was really fascinated with quartz and crystals and the crystal structure. And he believed that crystal was alive, like quartz crystal.
Oh, that's what they said.
And that totally ties into that. It totally makes sense.
Yeah. And they also said, though, that crystals actually degrade the energy a little bit. So they dirty it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So at some point they weren't even really using crystals because there was a much more direct way of just mind interfacing, but they used crystals as storage devices and power devices and light devices. And, they had these stones, there were spheres, and they said that, they were crystals. They look like rocks. They found these in archaeological digs, and they just look like perfectly spherical rocks, but those are crystals, and those were lights.
Ah.
And so, and they were like, yeah, in the homes, there would just be these little pedestals, where you would sit a candle or something.
Yeah.
And they would have all these little spherical things, and they were passed down apparently to generations on down, like Egypt. And, it was, but they even guarded that secret pretty highly for the few families that had some of those technologies,
Yeah. There was a Japanese researcher who worked with water and
I saw it.
Yeah, forming ice crystals in a specific pattern, and then using that reordered or reorganized water as a healing water. And it makes sense because back to just sound frequency, all of the cymatics and the table with the sand on it to generate the pattern, or to illustrate the pattern, really. That ties beautifully in with the ordering of the water and the crystalline shape of the water. And that all ties into how the space within a molecule, how there's more nothing than there is something within every molecule.
Well, there's all nothing.
Yeah, it's all nothing, basically.
Literally.
And so it's mind-blowing to me that at one point there was probably a civilization like Atlantis or dozens of others that have been talked about in the fringes that knew this, were able to use this. There is an argument to be made for people living a lot longer. And, we think, well, all the modern pollution and all these things. And yeah, that probably does factor into it. But if you have, 12 or 20 people in your tribe or in your group that are all chanting and, using crystals and bowls and, all of the things to correctly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. When you think about that too, like how most ancient religions in their prayers and songs had chants that they would do over and over again. And just by having the whole group, again, it's an amplification type thing, or, I guess an amplitudinal, I don't know the exact word to use, but, just by focusing it all together, it just makes it more powerful.
Yeah.
Because you're ordering that energy in that specific pattern.
Yeah. I mean, it's even in that, what I was listening to, there's so much information that pertains to what we're talking about right now that I'm like, God, I don't want to go back to that.
Yeah.
We distill this down every single episode, but it's just getting it through our thick skulls that everything is energy.
Yeah.
None of this is solid. And our belief systems are so concrete that it makes this concrete.
Right. Yes.
And we're like, well, that's impossible. Or if something happens, like, well, there's no way.
Right.
Or, because like how would you break apart a stone and then form it into something else with sound? Or how would you, and you're like, because sound is energy and the stone is energy and it's just all energy. So it's not magic.
Right.
That's the thing, is like, once your brain starts working in a way where you're like, things aren't things, it's just all waves.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, and one of the reasons everything seems so concrete to us is because we can't see the nothing. I think that if there was a way that we could actually perceive and quantify the nothing, then it would make so much more sense how none of this is actually tangible or real or whatever.
Which is a hilarious sort of statement. Like,
right. Yeah.
I watched that. What do we watch? We were watching something on Netflix. It was something with Stephen Greer.
The Ancient Apocalypse or something? Or?
Well, yeah, it was like one of his newer things. And, I love that dude. Like, he's really on a mission, and he's doing some really cool stuff, and he's really gotten in pretty good to show you that the government doesn't know anything.
Right. Yeah.
The quote, what we're shown, government doesn't, they're just as clueless as we are.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty wild.
Yes.
But I don't like to go into all that. So, but what is interesting is that, I totally lost what I was going to say.
And now we pause for a word from our sponsors.
For me personally, this is a rediscovery of energy. Everything is just one thing, and all these vibrations are signatures, sort of. I mean, if you want to put it like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so whenever you have a vibration of 2 hertz and then you blast a vibration of 2 hertz, something's going to happen.
Right.
And that's been proven over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
To the point of, like, why are we still here? And I know why we're still here.
Right. Yeah.
But like, it's a reorienting of your thinking, and which is even wilder because thinking, it's faster than light. It's the fastest thing that is known.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's wild to me too that, there's evidence to suggest that ancient civilizations were able to communicate telepathically, and there's no reason to believe that they couldn't. I guess the only reason to believe that they couldn't is that, one, we don't have a way to prove it, and two, we can't do it right now. So we're like, well, that probably didn't happen, or, that's a mistranslation of something or whatever. But it does make sense when you think about all that the thoughts are electrical impulses and frequency waves anyway. So maybe you had to put a little crystal on your forehead and the other person had to put one on their forehead, or what. I'm not sure how it worked, but there's a way that they were able to beam those thoughts into the other person's head. And then if you get a group of people doing it and they sit in a pattern or stand in a pattern or whatever it is, I mean, why wouldn't they be able to?
There's a lot that plays into it. You know, and it's all the same stuff. Like when you talk about cymatics, that's basically geometry.
Yes.
Geometry made by sound.
Right. Yes.
So that's proof already.
Yeah.
You just created a complex, very complex shape.
Yes.
By taking a bow on a plate.
Right.
And sprinkling sand on it, going, and then it forms like something that looks like it came from outer space.
Yeah. And a repeating pattern.
Exactly.
Because I bet if you had the size of a football field, it would be the same pattern, just bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nuts to me. Back to the cymatics thing, like, I don't know why that isn't proof enough. I don't know why people can't look at that and go, there's something to this. And then you look at patterns that repeat in nature, and, back to ice crystals, for example. Here are these geometric patterns, and they come up over and over again in different ways. And you can say, okay, the pattern is the thing, but most people will go, no, what created the pattern? That's the thing. And that comes back to vibration. That comes back to energy.
Yeah, I know. This is going to get really repetitive.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be like, well, there's these two dudes, and then they talk about all this crazy stuff real fast, and then they're like, oh, wait, it's all energy.
It's all energy.
And then they just go to sleep, and then the song comes on, and then this weird...
Yeah, we don't know what that is.
Yeah. Who cares?
Who cares?
It's really interesting. And I look at it like, okay, well, that's all fine. Like, you get there, but then it starts really being about an inward sort of journey for yourself. Like taking and I can't believe I said journey, but, a looking inside of your own existence to answer your own questions and figure it out. And it's always been that, but we're so indoctrinated into like looking outside of us.
Right.
For help.
Yeah.
And I still, like that's, I have like 1,000 weird devices, but it's just my interest.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like those cassette tapes that like we just got into playing cassettes backwards and stuff. So I'm like, ooh, I need some old Asian, like, I don't know if they're like workout tapes or they're like just old like TV. I don't know what they are, but anyway, so it's like, if I believe everything that I say, which I don't even have to believe it, like,
right.
Then I contain everything.
Right.
If I want to heal things, or I want things to be a way, or I want my life to go a certain way, or I want whatever it is, it's just my thoughts.
Yeah.
And that sounds insane, even more insane.
It does. Or like the whole speaking with intention, or when you speak, and those waves travel, the intention that's in there, that's encoded in there, is also energy itself. And that sounds like cuckoo land to, the vast majority of people, but it's absolutely true.
Well, yeah. Well, they call it prayer, or they call it what,
Yes, yeah, but it's all the same thing.
You wouldn't have so much of the same thing in different envelopes.
Right.
If it wasn't real.
That, and across millennia, across geographic, vast differences that, 3,000 years ago, how would someone have traveled, from the tip of South Africa to, the tip of Finland? They wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Back to this Dolores Cannon book that I was listening to yesterday. They were talking about how like myths and traditions got started. And like the Arabian Nights, how they're flying on the carpets and everything. And they were talking about, when I say they, the subconscious of whoever she had under hypnosis was going off about like, oh yeah, there were humans, and it was at the same sort of time, the Atlantis sort of time, whenever it was like the spark of being able to use your mind for creation and seeing immediate results, physically, quote. So they were talking about, they see this guy and he's, he can levitate, and they're like, oh, they use horses and traditional means to just get from place to place usually, but if they have to go from one continent to another, they use, or they have to transport something, they'll use something that looks like a big rug or a carpet, and they'll put the thing on the carpet, and they'll be on the carpet, and they would just use their mind and like levitate and go.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, that's where the flying carpet came from. They're like, yeah, yes, that's, and it sounds insane.
Yeah.
That sounds absolutely
right.
Like we should just turn everything off. Just be like,
Yeah, like people should come in with the straitjackets for us and be like, yeah, that's enough.
But like centaurs, mermaid, like all of that stuff, like there's stories to all of that, and it's all because we don't, like you said, we don't have proof.
Right.
And last thing, you said if we could measure nothing, or the source, or whatever it is, then everything would just be like, oh, of course.
Right.
That was the Stephen Greer thing.
Oh, really?
They were trying to, or like scientists are trying to measure nothing. And I was cracking up so hard because I was like, what are they going to do if they find nothing? Right. Oh, that's going to be something then. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So like, just cracked me up.
It's true. And it's hard to explain in a way that makes sense. And you can demonstrate all of these other things, but at the end of the day, conceptualizing nothing and then measuring nothing sounds preposterous. It just sounds,
it is.
It really is. But also though, that's one of the keys, I think, to like really grasping this.
Or using, or I wouldn't call it nothing anymore. I would just call it whatever the finest, what they call it, dark matter, 0 point, whatever it is,
antimatter,
energy, whatever you want to call it. That is still a thing, and that's okay. But it's the finest thing. I would say that thought is the finest thing. I would say that thought is directly antimatter.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, because there's no time involved in it, in thinking.
Yeah.
It seems like because of how we look at thinking or how we perceive thinking, it seems like it comes in from our mind. We have a story like there's a mind container, and then from the mind comes the thought. I can see it like just going, right. And then it's in my head, and then it goes back, or it goes wherever.
Yeah.
And that's all total crap.
Right.
It's just like there's no time.
Right.
And then there's thought, and then it's not.
That's it. Like, from early ages, everyone is taught, time is linear, and that was yesterday, and this is going to be tomorrow. And because of that, it is very difficult to conceptualize it any other way.
Right.
And because of that, then it's hard to conceptualize how a thought began in the first place and how it percolated up, through the whatever.
Yeah, because it has to be up through the whatever.
Right. I mean, it's just the trappings of
yeah, it's the language and the limitations of language and human, how we've been raised.
Yes. Well, and we haven't been taught to look at the world in this way. So this just seems so cuckoo.
Right.
And, it's a disservice.
Of course. it's a very effective disservice.
Yeah.
But I guarantee there are many people who really know how to utilize things.
Yeah.
And I stumbled upon this device. I don't even remember how I stumbled upon it, actually. Like, I have so much crazy stuff on my Instagram feed that pops up that sometimes I'll just follow it and I'll be like, oh, that looks weird. Yeah. And most of the times it's bull. That I think I'm like, I'm not going to go any further with that. Yeah. And then sometimes, like, this thing, like, I kept going deeper and deeper on it, and I'm like, oh, wow, it's really, like, science has really studied this, and it's a thing. So it's the terahertz frequency gap, basically, and it's in between microwaves and far infrared. So there's a gap where if you look at, like, we talk about vibration and cycles per second is how everything that we talk about in frequency, that's how it works. So, like, however many times this thing vibrates either back and forth or on and off per second is the frequency of it. So this is from like 2 to 10 trillion oscillations per second.
That's a lot.
So I don't even know, like, you can't wrap your mind around that. And I don't even know, like, how. But it's wild because, microwaves are pretty quick and far infrared is pretty quick, you know, so, like, it's quicker than terahertz. Yeah. So, what's interesting about the terahertz, what they call gap, is that all biological cells, DNA, all of it resonates within that gap beneficially. So when you're talking about Lakhovsky, so his machine was kind of working up into the gigahertz that they know about, and it's probably higher because of harmonics and stuff. Yeah. It got up into the terahertz probably, but his device was governed by the spark gap, and so the spark gap by itself includes apparently all frequencies and all harmonics. My buddy Mike told me that, and he was a genius guy, just absolute genius of electronics and physics and just crazy stuff. And he built a lot of stuff for me. But I asked him about a spark one day because I wanted him to build some of this Tesla stuff. I wanted him to build a multiple wave oscillator. Yeah. And he didn't care about it. Yeah. He wanted to build preamps. Yeah. Yeah. Which is cool. Yeah. But he's just like, spark gap is just, it's everything. It's like, he was like, it has all the harmonics and all of the frequencies that are in the gap. And it makes a lot of sense because Tesla used the spark gap. Yeah. So they used the spark gap, and then they used the antenna as a way to step that spark, to funnel that frequency into the, quote, physical dimensions of an antenna that make it live in a certain area of the spectrum. Okay. Right? Yeah. So, like, say I wanted to live like in the megahertz, well, then I would figure out what my antenna needs to be to sort of live there. And then because of how the antenna was made, and I'm not going to get too technical about this, basically it creates harmonics and the harmonics and the harmonics, and that's what goes way up into the spectrum.
I see. Okay.
So this is the same thing, only it's much more focused. I don't know how they've done it, but they're like, okay, here's the gap. And now they have a device, which I think it was like 10 plus years ago when they really started honing in on this and doing tests and things. But they were testing, and they created a device, and I think it was like $500,000, or it might have even been more, But this was only like maybe 5 or 6 years ago when they made that. And then, I got this thing this year, a few months ago. So now it's like $380.
Yeah.
So they really moved fast on how to get that down,
Yeah.
Apparently the U.S., Russia, China were all kind of working with this technology and kind of like studying it. And they still are studying it for like communications. And apparently 6G is like going to be up in the terahertz band, which is wild.
Yeah.
For the health of everything.
Right, yeah. Should be better.
Should be. I don't know. But so this is like it's like a blower. It's like it looks like kind of like a hairdryer, but like a straight.
Yeah.
It blows hot air through a modified quartz crystal tube with other rare earth elements in there to create these terahertz waves that actually come out of the end of this thing. Penetrates through most everything about 8 to 12 inches. And it is most effectively utilized by water. So water absorbs these waves, and that's why it works so well on biological life, because we're all water.
Yeah.
So even just like there's a lot to go into it, but, there's a certain company that kind of like got all the patents, jumped through all the hoops in China, made the device. I don't want to I'm not trying to plug anybody, but Prife, it's the first one I heard about, and it's the one that everybody's like, okay, there are the ones, but I mean, I'm sure there are other companies, and I've heard that and everything, but yeah, so, you can charge your water with it. When you charge this water, it is supposed to structure it linearly, in which I don't like some of the technical stuff on this. I don't really understand a lot of it, but it's for hydration, immediate hydration of the cells and of the tissue inside. And you can actually tell if I give you a glass of this spring water to drink, and I'm going to do that for you.
Yeah.
And then you'll taste that. I'm not even going to tell you what you
right.
I want you to draw your own thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
You'll be like, whoa. Yeah.
It's got a blue light in it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing that's really fascinating to me, just on on a physics level or something. But when the frequency of sound changes, it changes the pitch. It changes how we hear it. When the frequency of light changes, it changes the color. And one really neat thing about the two to me is that when light encounters what we think of as a solid object, it slows down. When sound hits a solid object, it usually speeds up, or not necessarily speeds up so that it would change the pitch, but it can amplify it. It does kind of the opposite of what light does. So, I'm thinking about the optimal frequency for each person, and then there's got to be a corresponding optimal light frequency as well. A specific color. And, people talk about auras and stuff like that. And there has to be some kind of correlation between those two.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about the visible light spectrum. It's the rainbow.
Right.
And, you know, this is left probably to another episode, but there was a guy named Dinshaw. Have you heard of him?
Mm-mm.
Spectrochrome.
Oh, okay. I've heard of spectrochrome.
Okay, so spectrochrome, I have it, and I have a book on it too. Remind me, I'll give it to you, and you can just look it over. It is the wildest shit.
Awesome.
He basically he built a machine that was like a box with a slit in it, where your eyes, you just would sit in front of this box, and inside there would be different color glass, sort of, not gels, but like the equivalent of gels that he made of these colors, like yellow, green, like, right? And he studied it to a point where he knew what each one of these lights did in succession to each other for different types of illnesses.
Oh, okay.
And things that people would come in about.
Yeah.
And so you would sit in front of this box, and this light would just basically be shining into your eyes, and you would just like kind of sit there and go all weird and meditate-y.
Yeah.
And then it would change he would change them accordingly, like for whatever and it's low light.
Yeah.
It's not even bright light. So
Yeah.
so this thing that I got, it's from the Dinshaw Institute, and they created specific gels to go over an incandescent light bulb with a, you can get one of those. I got one of those like stage light things.
Yeah.
And then where you can put the gel in.
Yeah.
And it's just, and that book tells you how to do it, and it's, I can't say that I've like spent a whole lot of time. I got into it like years ago, and I was just like, this is amazing. And then I just kind of like shelved it.
Yeah.
Like I do a lot of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can explore at any given time, but yeah, I think about like how sensitive I personally am to light and sound. And I've found that me personally, different lighting, and I realize a lot of people are this way, whether they've figured it out or not, or observed it within themselves, but certain lighting allows me to do certain things. Certain lighting makes me nervous. Certain lighting makes me very relaxed, Yep. And it isn't even necessarily like incandescent versus fluorescent. Although those, fluorescent lights are really strange to me, because that was when I was young, that was the first light I could hear. And I was like, why am I hearing this?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. That makes so much more sense.
It's such a bad light.
It is terrible.
It makes me want to die.
Yeah, it is. And like the conspiracy mind is like, oh, I bet that was done on purpose. But I'm like, that's giving people too much credit. Like I think modern man is maybe not as wise in some ways, as what it appears primitive man might have been, or at least not wise to the natural world around them,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, I also think about light and creativity, or light and, that really interests me as well, because I'm like, there's certain times where you go in certain places and you get this feeling of just like absolute serenity, and you don't know it's the light.
Yeah.
But it's not any specific or special type of light.
Right.
It's just the orientation of the lighting in the room,
Yep.
where it's placed, what it's reflecting off of. I'm not really sure,
Yeah.
because I've noticed this upstairs. we have this giant light, the ones that hang over.
Oh, like over a couch or something?
Yeah. So we have that, and we move it every year to put the Christmas tree up. Mm-hmm. So like every time we move that light over to the other side of the room, I have an absolute 180-degree turn in the way that I feel in that room.
Crazy.
Every year. Every year.
Yeah.
And we've done it. We've moved it just on the off times of that too, and it's the same way. It's just like this. It's not the time of year. It's not because it's the location of where that light is and how it's hitting my presence.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's unexplained. Same light, same everything. And then when it's right over me, I feel not so awesome. We went so long, I gotta type my password in.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah, I need to start 123 minutes.
Oh, Jesus. That's 2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's 12:19. What the hell? Good thing I don't have an appointment.